Hey, everybody, it's Natalie Bensavanga, and I'm back for another edition of Facts Over Fear. This time, I'm hanging out with award winning journalist Kim Lyons, and she's also a contributor to Facts Over Fear. So we love her for that. Hey, Kim, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
You know,
It's almost feeling like spring. I don't know. Maybe
I
it's a little
know.
hope in the air.
I like a little hope in the air, especially before I read the news because I feel hopeful. And then I read the news, and then I'm like, what?
Right.
What fresh level of
What
hell
happened? Yeah.
awaits us today?
The funny
Uh,
thing is, whenever we do one of those, after we wrap up and sign off,
yeah,
there's always something new that's happened
something
just in
else.
like the half hour we've been on.
I know. I mean, you could do a show 24/7 and you would never scratch the surface of the chaos
No.
unfolding before
Right.
us.
Right.
And speaking of, guys, we're going to hit on quite a few topics today. We didn't mean to talk this much about Trump today, but it's just working out this way. We're actually going to kick things off, though, with Pete Hegseth. He blew through $93 billion worth of your tax dollars and spent it on things like lobster, steak, and a baby grand piano. I'm not even kidding. I wish I was. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to discuss that Trump is basically refusing to sign any more bills into law, which don't threaten us with a good time until they
How
pass.
has that stopped him?
I know, until they pass voter restrictions. So we need to talk about that. That's interesting timing, especially with the midterms coming up. And then we want to discuss what's going on with this bombing at the Iran school. A lot of children, mostly girls, have died, and Trump has continually been spinning this narrative and may have got himself into hot water with his most recent iteration of what happened. And then we're going to be ending on a conversation around Trump, his cabinet members, and the shoes they're wearing. And I'm just going to leave that little teaser
Stay
for
tuned.
us. Stay tuned. But let's kick things off talking a little bit about what's going on with the Pentagon. This has been all over the news. And this morning, I immediately texted you, Kim, and I was like, we got to talk about this.
Yeah.
So here's what's happening. The Pentagon spent 93 billion with a B dollars in September of 2025, more money than it had in any other fiscal year since 2008, much of which was used on pricey food, luxury goods, high-end furniture, according to a recent analysis by government watchdog Open the Books. Now, for decades, the research organization has tracked the annual use it or lose it spending spree, which is a time when the military spends the rest of its budget really by any means necessary before funding rules forces it to be a forfeit. And then they could potentially then see a reduced budget. But there's never been anything quite like this. In the last 5 working days, this is hard for me to understand. In the last 5 working days of September alone, the DoD spent $50.1 billion on grants and contracts. Just to put that into perspective, you guys, that's more than the annual defense budget of countries like Italy and Israel. Here's a little bit, Kim, and then I can't wait to get your thoughts. They spent $6.9 million on lobster tail.
Just in September, they spent
you.
that. Yeah, just in September.
$2 million on Alaskan king crab. Okay. $15.1 million on ribeye steak, $124,000 on ice cream machines, and $139,000 on donuts. I think my husband might have had something to do
Okay,
with
and
that
I was
one.
going to say, I almost been like, okay, the donuts maybe, but like, who eats that much lobster tail? You can't eat it every meal.
You guys, I'm laughing because I want to cry. And the irony of this is on the final day of September, if you guys recall, Kim and I do.
Something else was going on right around then. What was it?
A couple of things, but one thing that the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told the military in a speech was that it was completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon. And it was also a time where SNAP benefits were on the chopping block as well. Kim, I know I just ran through a bunch of numbers, and normally I don't love to give people a ton of stats, but to me, that seemed so necessary to just understand the level of chaos here. What was your first reaction when you read this story?
Well, I think it's a nice reminder also that, hey, they have this use it or lose it budget. Just because you have the money doesn't mean you have to spend it. You could, maybe you could go to something else, like SNAP benefits for millions of Americans. I don't know.
Yeah.
That to me it seems like one piece of this. It's the larger problem, right? That there's this money available. There's there's so much available to military to spend on whatever they want. And someone like Pete Hegseth has sort of the pen or the rubber stamp or whatever, however he signs checks over there. And, it's really flagrant and blatant because this is all public record. They know this is going to come out. They know that they're going to be, people will be able to view this information. If they don't, they do now. But, it's this sense of like, we're going to do what we want. We don't care. The consequences, okay. But I don't understand. It just to me seems like it's such an exorbitant. You couldn't just order some sandwiches. I mean, if you're having meetings, you need to feed people. Okay. But it's just this, this over the top, the most expensive possible thing. And it goes into this whole bravado of like the best. And we have to have, it's this attitude of like the entitlement of like, we're going to spend all this money. It's taxpayers' money. It's our money. And, they're just spending it like there's no tomorrow. And just because you can spend it doesn't mean you have to. That's a thing that is very pervasive, and especially in government contracts where, there's this big pot of money for a project. If we don't use it for our project in Pennsylvania or Ohio or wherever, someone else will get it. Well, okay, maybe someone else will get it. It's this mindset of like, we got to get at the trough while we can. We have to line up and, get what we want and, just get everyone else out of the way to spend that money. Maybe just still spend the money. Maybe, there's somewhere else we could do with it. Maybe just, it stays in the bank. Money.
Yeah.
Crazy idea.
Thought.
Yeah.
Well, it's just sort of like, where's Doge when you need them? I mean, it's just.
Yeah. That's a whole other conversation.
What I find frustrating about all of this is the hypocrisy of it. Telling people that they're going to have to eat smaller portions of food, telling people to tighten their.
Telling generals they're fat.
Telling generals that they're fat. But like this idea that the average American is supposed to show restraint, is supposed to show sacrifice.
Yeah.
And they're on the other side of this being very opulent, very decadent. It's kind of screaming Soviet Russia to me. It's giving like 80s vibes. Like, what is happening here?
Well, and also you think about there's so many restrictions on what people who are on staff benefits can actually buy. There's things that are just there. They're not allowed. They can't buy. They have to buy the cheapest possible version, variety of milk or, whatever. And, there's a lot of conversation about, they shouldn't be buying candy with that. They shouldn't let them buy what they want. These are their benefits. And, to have people sort of restricted in what they can buy, and who are the majority of SNAP benefits go to feed children, right? So, so limiting children and what they can eat and then just eating lobster tail and donuts and ice cream machine, I don't know, playing a grand piano while you do it. It's just so like, it unfortunately becomes so commonplace. And it's the thing that we can't let this kind of thing not shock us or not annoy us because it's a kind of sort of ongoing, just we don't care about anything except what we want. And we're going to do what we want.
And I think what bothers me about this too is, I did bring up Doge in sort of this joking way, but, there was this mentality last spring, where all the Republicans were up in arms over every single cent that was being spent because we now had this entity that was going to cut the fat. Yep. And then you fast forward, Doge has been dismantled. They've said that it didn't do anything except steal our data.
Yeah.
And now in its place, we have this sense of, like you said, entitlement from this very specific group of people. It really feels like the American people are continually being fleeced and we're continually being manipulated and told to wait our turn.
Yeah.
While the people that Trump has put in these positions of power that apparently there are no consequences or rules can just do whatever they want. And I'm getting really tired of it personally.
Yeah. To me, the thing that's the most obnoxious about it is it's so blatant. Like, again, these are public dollars. They're going to be documented. This group, Open the Books, has been doing this for years. It's not, like they've just done this for the first time this year. They do this all the time. And so these kinds of reports come out when this money is being spent. And, whether or not Hegseth personally knows that, someone within the Pentagon knows, hey, your budget's going to become public. Are you okay with people knowing you spent $6.9 million on lobster tail in 1 month? Apparently so.
Yeah. I want to dovetail to the next topic because I want to discuss a little bit more about what is going on in our government right now, which is a whole lot of not good.
How much time you have?
Yeah, exactly. Because there's a lot happening here. If you're just joining us, I'm Natalie Bensvanga. I'm with award-winning journalist Ken Lyons, who's also a contributor to Facts Over Fear. And we're talking about the news of the day. So this story did not come out today. It came out yesterday, and I wanted to
All the days kind of blend together, don't they? Like, when was this news?
considering there was like probably 40 things just this morning that we
Right.
could touch on. I want to make
Yes.
it clear this is old
Yeah.
news from
In case you
yesterday.
missed it yesterday.
In case you missed it, this is from the AP, but it's been circulating everywhere. Trump pushes GOP on voting bill demanding an end to most mail balloting. I don't think people are aware of what this could mean. He is basically saying that he won't sign any other legislation into law until Congress passes a strict proof of citizenship voting bill that he says must also end Americans' ability to end vote by mail. Now, this is a startling demand months before the midterms. He told the House Republicans during their annual retreat, you'll love this, Kim, at his golf club in Florida,
Yes.
that he doesn't think he'll win elections unless voting laws are toughened up to prevent fraud, even though mail ballots are very popular in many states, and federal law, as I have said repeatedly, already requires that voters in national elections be U.S. citizens. And you prove that when you go to register,
Right.
and that there's very little to no evidence that suggests that non-citizens are even trying to vote. In fact, our biggest problem in the United States, in my opinion, is we don't vote. Like, people on average aren't voting. So
Yeah.
this idea to me, it was a little scary because it's gone from we need more voter ID laws to now I want to cancel mail-in ballots, which is really ironic considering a lot of military when they're overseas vote this way. People that are disabled, who are elderly, a lot of Republicans
Yep.
vote this way. A lot of his demographic would be
Right.
harmed by this too.
Yeah.
Kim, were you startled by how strongly worded he was making this threat, or do you think it's an empty threat like most of the other things he says?
I think it's one of those things that he says and then walks back, but doesn't make it look like he's walking it back. Like he said, like he just, kind of portrays that he got what he wanted. I think the key thing, he mentioned this during the State of the Union. I don't know how many people could hang in through that whole thing. It was the longest in history, and it really felt like it. And what he said during that, he was talking about the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act would actually potentially disenfranchise a lot of people because it requires you to have, basically, if you've changed your name at any point, hello, millions of American women who change their name when they get married. You potentially, if you don't have a passport, you don't have an ID that shows the name that you registered with, you might not be able to vote or to register to vote if this passes. The thing it does not have in it is anything about mail ballots. So Trump is conflating these things because he's obsessed with mail ballots. He's convinced that there's fraud there. He's convinced that the Democrats are somehow using them, or at least he's trying to convince people that that's what he thinks, that there's fraud in mail ballots, where the amount of mail ballot fraud in actuality over decades is infinitesimally low. And if you want to really get down to the nitty gritty, most recently in Pennsylvania, I want to say it was a week or two ago, there was a guy who was actually convicted of voter fraud. He tried to vote in Pennsylvania and in Florida. And guess who he tried to vote twice for? You'll never guess.
I'll never. Could it be Trump?
Yes, it was Trump.
Oh,
and so
I was shocked, guys.
So if there is voter fraud, it's very limited. And this bill that he's been talking about, the SAVE Act, it doesn't have anything about mail ballots in it. It would have to be added. A provision would have to be added or have to be tacked on. He's also trying to tack on another provision that's completely unrelated about transgender people in sports. That whole, the whole just hate-filled diatribe about men and women's sports and all of that, just nonsense, anti-trans nonsense. He's trying to cram that in there too. So he doesn't even really know what's in this bill because he keeps talking about mail ballots. He's obsessed with mail ballots. But, this bill doesn't address that in any way. It's basically a voter ID law. That's what a national voter ID law. Many states already have them in place. We fight them tooth and nail at most levels because they disenfranchise a lot of people who don't have a driver's license, people who don't drive. And as you said, many people who vote by mail do so because they are infirm, they have a disability, they live in a rural area, they are deployed overseas serving our country. So, and he says he's going to carve out provisions for those mail ballots. But but there's nothing in this yet that addresses mail ballots. So I'm not sure. And also, there's an awful lot of things happening. They're going to have to, we've got this whole war thing going on. That at some point somebody's going to have to get Congress involved, maybe. And the whole DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is still underfunded. It's still basically closed. It's shut down because Democrats finally said, hey, we're not going to keep funding the agencies overseas ICE until you get it together. Now, unless something happens, unless Trump signs something there, unless if there's ever a bill that comes together, is he going to put aside this threat to not sign anything until the SAVE Act is? That could really follow things up for Republicans as well. So, it's a sort of typical Trump bombast of all or nothing. And I think he'll probably walk it back at some point. And, I really hope that Democrats stick to their guns on this one, because it's really a method of disenfranchising more and more people in a time when, voting is super, super important. And to make it harder and harder is just, it's fairly typical, strategy to sort of keep people away from the polls or discourage them from voting. And it's this thing he's just been obsessed with for such a long, long time. And he's once again has brought it back up and thinks it's really important.
And before I agree with everything you shared there. And before we move on to the next topic, I just want to also add, I talk a lot about how a voter ID is a poll tax, and people throw that back at me. But people need to understand, if only certain people have to pay to vote, meaning they have to go out and get this special piece of paper that
even getting a passport is not inexpensive.
They're expensive. They're
and it takes time.
$100.
Right.
But in that case, what you're essentially saying is you need to pay a special fee to vote. So if they seriously wanted everyone to have like some kind of uniform specific piece that you needed to bring, they would have to pay for it. The government would have to give it to literally every single, it would have to be like your social security card that you get when you're basically born. And it's like, that's not a thing that they're going to do.
Nope.
That's not the purpose of it.
You'll be on your own.
Because they want you on your own, because they don't want you to vote. And I think people need to understand that it has actually nothing to do with getting another ID. It has everything to do with
discouraging people from voting. Yeah,
exactly. And so there's so much more we could unpack there. But for sake of time, I want to move on to the next topic. If you're just joining us, I'm Natalie Bensaveng. I'm here with Kim Lyons. She is an award-winning journalist and also an occasional contributor to Facts Over Fear. Now, Trump has been doing a lot of crazy this week. Okay. And even I think more so than normal. I think the dude is unraveling him. And this to me, the whole situation in Iran, obviously, we've talked a lot about this on the show. What's going on over there, it's horrifying. But the way Trump is talking about it is also compounding the problem. And this is from the New Republic, but this has also been circulating everywhere. I also posted a clip about what he shared on my Instagram at Natalie Bensafanga. You can check that out. Trump is just making stuff up, you guys, about the strike on the Iranian girls' school. President Trump was caught in an obvious lie about the military strike on a girls' primary school in Iran that has killed so far 175 people. 175 people, most of them children. Speaking at a news conference last night, Monday evening, March 9th, Trump floundered when asked whether the United States would accept responsibility for the deadly strike after it was reported that the strike was conducted with a Tomahawk missile. Now, this is a weapon primarily used by the United States military. Now, Trump said that these types of missiles were one of the most powerful around, but were also a generic weapon that the United States sold to many countries, that Iran was in possession of it. Now, this is what's concerning. And I appreciated the New York Times reporter.
Agree. Because he was very specific the way he worded the question.
Yes.
So, like, here's exactly what you said, Mr. President.
Yes.
How can this be?
And here's what he said. Sean McCreesh said this. Mr. President, you suggested that Iran somehow got its hand on a Tomahawk and bombed its own elementary school on the first day of the war. You're the only person in your government saying this. Even your defense secretary wouldn't say that when he was asked, standing over your shoulder on your plane Saturday. Why are you the only person saying this? I want to start, before we get into Trump's answer, I want to start with how important it is for the journalists in the room to be talking to the president like this. Can you share a little bit about this, Kim, from a journalistic perspective?
Yeah,
because I'm seeing a lot of soft shoeing around this man.
Well, it's I think a lot of it is this sort of tradition of journalism of having objectivity. It's this, sense of presenting information without context, which I think we realize is really, especially with this president, is really dangerous in many ways. Just to say that Trump said this thing, you're now becoming a megaphone for what he just said, unless you put it into the context in which he said it, or without evidence, or whatever, however you want to talk about it. But the thing that, what was interesting about this was when he was asked the question, he kind of floundered for a minute. He kind of, wasn't really answering the question, but he said, "Oh, but I don't know enough about it." Well, that's an okay answer too. Like that's a
Right.
truthful answer. Say, I don't know enough about it, but instead he always has to default to it wasn't us, it wasn't me. It's
Uh-huh.
this default position, and sometimes it's clearly not accurate. And I think kudos to that journalist for speaking up, for saying it in a really direct way. And you don't have to like ask it in a gotcha way. You can
Right.
be respectful if that's what you want to do. But I think a lot of journalists, especially in the White House, especially in DC, they're worried about losing their access. They're losing their pass to get on Air Force One. And that's not nothing, right? I mean, I
Right.
get that. But if that is the cost of your access, what do you have access to? What is it that you're protecting? What are you
Thank you.
so worried about, not having access to if all you're getting is information that on its face cannot be true? And it's almost insulting to your intelligence to hear information it can't be accurate, and you track it down to verify that it's not accurate, and then bring it back to him and say, look, here's what the evidence shows. You said this. How can that be? I think more of that is good. And frankly, it's okay for you to say you don't know something. If you're,
Right.
how could you possibly know every single piece of information? He could say, I don't know. We'll get back to it, whether he would or not.
Right.
But his default position is just always say, no, it wasn't me. And to try and just disavow any responsibility and turn it around on the other
Well,
party.
and it was also concerning because if it's true that they have them, then somebody made a point of saying, well, then did the United States sell them
Right.
to
How did
Iran?
they get
Because
them?
that's a problem because currently
Right.
the only other militaries in possession of these Tomahawk missiles are the British, the Australians, and the Japanese. So is Trump insinuating then that like it was offered up by he
How did they
just
get them?
opened
Right.
this whole other can of worms to your point because he just doesn't know when to stop.
Right.
And that has put us in so much hot water. But this attitude of like, and even Pete Hegseth saying recently, like, yeah, people are going to die. Trump saying this, people are going to die.
Yeah.
Which people? Whose
Yeah.
people?
Right. Right.
And I think we've got to stop with this cavalier energy around the United States
Yeah.
trying
It's
to
not a game. It's
throw
not a
its weight
video
around
game.
everything.
Right.
Thank
Right.
you. And
Right.
we've already had over 100 soldiers wounded today
Yeah.
over there,
Right.
and this all just feels, Kim, it feels so wasteful.
And I think the other thing is, you don't always want to be saying, well, if the other side did this, but can you imagine if
I
Iran
know.
bombed a girls' school in New York City or in Washington, D.C. or in Missoula, Montana, anywhere in the United States, and tried to say, no, that wasn't us, that was you guys. I mean, it would boggle the mind because it's a preposterous thing to suggest
Yes.
and it's a blatant, situation where this was, there's a lot of sort of reporting around how this happened. How did they end up bombing a girls' school? One theory is that it was based on old intelligence, that it used to be near a munitions factory, and that's what they thought they were bombing. But I mean, there's even Republicans who are saying, look, we have to
Yeah.
investigate this. This is a potential war crime. We can't just
Yeah.
brush this aside. And I think that's what Trump and Hegseth are hoping, that the more firepower, the more,
Well, wasn't there two bombs also
Sure.
dropped on
Well,
this school?
right. Yeah. It wasn't
I
just
mean,
one.
one, but
Right.
now two?
One, you could say, okay, that was an accident. Two, it doesn't really feel like an accident.
It
So,
doesn't.
oh,
And it's just, there seems to be this bad trend happening where we seem to be okay now, or at least have been softened to this idea of civilian targets. We
as long
saw
as they're
this.
not American civilians,
Well,
apparently that's okay.
exactly, because it's like we saw this in Gaza. Oh no, we'll never bomb a hospital. How many
Yeah.
hospitals were bombed? I
Right.
mean, I think the problem is once you allow for this is
Yeah.
exactly why these things are war crimes. These are
Right.
exactly why there are these hard lines,
Right.
because we're seeing the real life repercussions of
And
what
if
happens.
the United States is not going to abide by international law, well, how could we possibly expect anybody else to? Why would they
Exactly.
if we're not?
Exactly. And so I think there's just a lot more here than meets the eye.
For sure.
For
For sure.
sure. But okay, we're going to move from the eyes to the feet for this last one, you guys, because Kim sent me a story earlier. This is wild. The title of this story, and I'm looking at this from Yahoo, but it's also everywhere. Trump is reportedly giving shoes to staffers, and everybody's afraid not to wear them.
Right.
Okay. President Trump has been doling out shoes to aides who are reportedly afraid of being seen wearing other footwear. The Wall Street Journal.
The Wall Street Journal.
That's
Yeah.
my
Not
favorite
some
part.
left-wing rag, right?
No, the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday, Monday, March 9th, that the president has given leather Oxfords to staff. I love that they're Oxford to staff, agency leaders, lawmakers, and other bigwigs. In cabinet meetings, he's even asked his department heads, "Did you get the shoes?" Trump is partial to Florsheim shoes, which are relatively affordable, many pair costing around
Yeah.
$150. All of the boys have them, said one female White House official. Another cracked, "It's hysterical because everyone's afraid not to wear them." JD Vance and Rubio each have received 4 pairs of shoes. And Trump repeatedly refers to the two men as his kids. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm dying right now. Like,
Right. Well,
what is happening?
it's kind of if you think back to 2024, and it's all a lot hazy for me anyway, all that went down. You remember when he was in Philadelphia and he introduced his gold sneakers? Why didn't he give those out to his
I
to his
forgot
staff?
about them.
Yeah. Yes. Shout out to my husband who is watching the feed right now, reminding me that Trump sneakers were a thing for a second there, like gold sneakers. I don't know if you even know if you could ever actually buy those, but
I
so
forgot about those. So much happens, man.
the funny thing is with the Florsheim shoes is they're pretty standard dress shoes. You know, they're nothing special, but you know, a lot of people already have them. They're been around for a long time. And the Wall Street Journal contacted them and said, "Did you know that the president is ordering these, shoes for it?" And they were like, "We don't really have any, like, it doesn't seem that they are aware that they're supplying shoes to the White House. So it's not like they're, giving these shoes to the administration or anything like that. It just seems like he's homed in on these shoes. He thinks they look good. He likes them himself, and he wants all of his cabinet to have shoes." Now, there's a very famous by now photo of Marco Rubio wearing a pair of these shoes, apparently, that are clearly too big for him. Like, you see that they're too big for him. It's sort of zoomed in on his feet. And it's like, why don't you just say these aren't my size? Well, because the president is making an insinuation about what your shoe size says about you. I'm going to leave that there. But I think,
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't even make that line.
Yeah. He made that comment in the Oval Office, apparently. I think the New York Times reported that back in January. So.
Now I can't unhear that.
Yeah. Sorry, but,
So thanks
the
for
context
that.
is always the worst possible thing you can think of. Yeah.
So all the guys are shuffling around in
giant shoes that don't fit.
They got like their big thick socks on and trying to fit them in.
Put a little tissue paper in there.
This would be awesome if it wasn't just so pathetic and so on brand
and
for this
so
administration.
Strange, so weird.
So weird. And I also think it's interesting that the shoe company is also just trying to distance themselves. They're like, look,
we don't know.
We know these shoes are nice, but we're not doing that.
Well, the funny thing is, I think the Journal was even saying a lot of the people who he's given the shoes to are like, yeah, I have nice Fendi shoes I'd like to wear instead of these, but I can't wear them. I have to wear the president's approved shoes. So presidential dress code for his cabinet, you got to wear them. Now, there's no word if he's given any shoes to any of the women that work in the White House. Do women work in the White House still? Is that still a thing?
It depends on what capacity. Honey Badger says they are clowns. It's fitting. Listen, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not disagreeing with you there, honey. But I do think it's sort of indicative of the larger issue, which is everyone is afraid to tell him anything. And that, to me, that's actually what's very
the concerning
at the
part,
heart
for sure.
of this is it has nothing really to do with the shoes. It's the idea that this man is such a bully and such a tyrant, and he clearly picks his favors in the moment, and everybody is trying to curry favor with him because we saw how easily he will push somebody out when the optics look bad. And a warning to everybody in that White House: he does not care about you.
They all think they're going to be the ones. They all think I'm the one that's going to make the difference. And they see what's happened to other people that, they have fallen out of favor with them. And I think they just, I don't know. I think they have their own aspirations, and they're willing to suffer through this. It's remarkable, but I mean, at a certain point, don't you have some dignity? Don't you want to push back on things? Even if it's not the shoes. Maybe the shoes are a minor thing. Maybe it's just, the president likes them. It's, not a big deal. But it's the constant attitude that you're not going to question. That's a problem.
If you had dignity, I don't think you'd still be in this White House.
Well, that's a whole other conversation, isn't it?
Listen, that's an after-hour show for a cocktail and a chat.
Several cocktails.
Let me tell you. Oh, yeah. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Facts Over Fear, breaking down the news of the day. because there literally is so much. I didn't even have to go back more than 24 hours.
Yes.
And
Within the last 30 minutes, we don't even know. Like, I'm going to put my
I'm
computer back
afraid
on.
to like get
Yes.
off and see what we've missed.
Yes.
Kim, you're everywhere. You do so much
No.
incredible work. Can you share with people how they can connect with you if they have a tip and where
Yeah.
your work is right now?
Yeah. So you can find me on Blue Sky. I kind of lurk there a little bit and watch the conversation there. It's just Kimley,
I need to get back
Kimly.
on there.
No, yes and no. I sort of go back and
Okay.
forth. It's good in some ways. It's got its issues, but I find the conversation to be more palatable than a lot of other networks right
Fair.
now. And then, I'm working on a couple of freelance pieces here and there. I'm trying to get back in the cadence of doing my own newsletter. And of course, life always gets in the way of that. But it's lions.kim at protonmail.com. If you have tips or things you think I should look into or write about or you're interested in, I would love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kim, for all of your great insights and for sharing your knowledge and for everybody that tuned in.
It's like a therapy session for us to
It
discuss.
truly is. It's kind of
Crazy.
cathartic.
Yeah.
We need these regular dish sessions for
Agreed.
sure.
Agreed.
But everyone, please, as always, until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Have a great rest of your evening. Bye, everybody.